Welcome to a special episode of Wholehearted. Where are we at?
We are in the middle of a sagebrush mountain up in the very top of Utah, in Logan, Utah. It's about just past 7 o'clock.
Yeah, 7:15.
And we're waiting for the sun to rise. So the sun's probably going to be hitting our face about midway through our episode today, and it's going to feel really good.
Yeah, hopefully we get lit up. It's cold.
Yeah, but it's beautiful out here today. So welcome, you guys. We, as promised, it's been a while since we've actually had an episode, but we've decided that we're going to start outlining our core principles with the Love Strong project. And these principles are the core principles of what we would call a wholehearted, healthy, happy life. And our first principle today, as we talked about in our last episode, is the wrestle with God. And that's kind of what we're going to outline a little bit today.
Yeah, so one of the things that we're trying to do with these core principles is associate a symbol that is common and relatable. So the symbol for this one, the wrestle seeking God, is a candle. And not just any candle, one that's lit. Otherwise, you're not doing your work, right?
Right.
But why did we, this is the first one of 12. Why is this the first one? We chose that it would be number one. And why did we choose those words, the wrestle seeking God?
Yeah, so this has been something that we've been wrestling with for a long time because we wanted it to feel right. We wanted it to be what we think, capture the essence of what we're trying to get at. And the reason we picked the wrestle is because both of us in our lives have not had a linear relationship with God. It's
just getting better.
Yeah,
that's it.
It's been up and down. It's been a roller coaster. It's been a constant wrestle where sometimes we feel close, we feel connected, we feel supported, we feel like there's just this like communication between us and our higher power, and everything feels right. And then there have been periods of time where we wonder if he's even there. And it's usually been in the ups and downs of our struggles through life in wrestling to try to develop a relationship with God. So that was one of the reasons we picked the wrestle. And the reason we picked it first is because, one of the reasons we picked it first is because at the core, we are built with a question. We're built to wonder what our purpose is. We're built to wonder where we come from. And that question alone continuously leads us as human beings back into that constant struggle of wondering about the things that sometimes we can't really put a physical finger on. Call it faith, right? So that's one of the reasons why.
I know on the way up we were discussing a few different thoughts that we had about this topic. We've each kind of sought it out in our own way through pondering or scripture study or prayer. And kind of funny that the topic is the thing that we had to do in order to get to the topic and get ideas on what the topic needed to be and how to really fill it with meaning. And what are some of the things that came to your mind? I know personal experiences that you've had and maybe some that are from other people.
Yeah, so introducing this a little bit, Chase and I have been really wrestling with this whole project that we've been on as part of this wrestle with God. We've really taken it seriously to try to make sure that the things that we're doing are things that God wants us to be doing. And in that process, there has been a lot of change, a lot of struggle. I'm sure there'll continue to be so. And in the process of developing this specific topic, we were thinking over the last several weeks about our own struggle with God. And so a few of the things that kind of came to my mind were personal stories of specific types of things in my life that I've struggled with God. And one of the stories I think I've shared pieces of before that came to my mind was when I was in high school, I had one of my best friends die early. And the way that he died led me to a very massive wrestle with God. I've always been a religious person. I grew up a religious kid. I've always believed in God. I've always felt close to God. But on this particular instance, it was a cold winter night, and we played on the basketball team. And after a game one night, we were deciding what to do as a group of friends, and we decided to go up on the school roof, where we'd snuck a couch up there, and we'd go up and hang out, and we'd just visit and do what teenage kids do up on the roof, you know. And as we were deciding to do that, I remember feeling sick to my stomach. I'm feeling like, you know what, I don't really want to go do that today, but I was the youngest one. I didn't have the courage to say no, and so I just kept my mouth shut. We went up on the school roof, hung out. On the way back down, it had gotten really cold, and there were 5 of us, and it had gotten icy, and right where we shimmied up a column to get up on the roof, my friend slipped, and he fell, and I hurried and got to the bottom. My other friends had gotten scared and ran away. One of them went to call the paramedics, and I stayed and I did the first aid on him until the paramedics showed up, and I could tell that things weren't right. And the paramedics got there. They asked me to walk to his house and tell his parents which hospital they were taking him to. I did that, and then I ran home. It happened to be my dad's 40th birthday party, and they had a bunch of friends there, and I didn't want to bug them, so I snuck in the side door. I went down into the basement, and I knelt down, and I started to pray like I'd never, ever prayed to God before. I mean, I'd prayed before, and I believed in God, but this was the most fervent prayer I'd ever offered. And in the midst of that prayer, I had what I call a spiritual experience, and I felt totally consumed by love. I felt just pure warmth go through me. I had this peace of mind. This thought came through my head that said, you know what, Tyler, everything's okay. It's going to be okay. I literally got up out of bed, got up on my knees, climbed into bed, and fell asleep, slept like a baby. And then I woke up the next morning to the phone ringing, and it was my friend's parents calling to tell me that they had just taken him off life support and that he was dead. And I couldn't wrap my head around that. How could this God who I just had an experience with the night before, telling me he loved me and that everything was okay, now allow my friend to be dead? And that messed me up. For several years, I had questions, I had doubts, I had struggles. How could everything be okay and my friend end up dead? And especially because I partly felt responsible, because I'd felt like I had, call it a prompting, to not go up on the school roof, but somehow I'd allowed it to happen. And for several years after that, I got into a deep depression. I had questions about God. I felt some resentment towards God. And it's only been through the process of the struggle that I've come to realize that God was in all of those details. I don't think he made my friend fall off the roof, but I think he was able to insert himself into that pain and into that struggle, and in some ways he used that struggle to guide me into what I do for a living today. Because as a result of my struggles, my depression, I was led to counseling, I was led to other mental health professionals, I was taught about grief and struggle, and in a lot of ways, the experiences that I went through have turned me into the man that I am. And that's as a result of what I believe God has done to turn me into that man. He's taken something and made something beautiful out of it. And I've had that happen over and over and over again with different things in life. You know, where there's this struggle that happens, we don't know what's going on, things don't seem to be right. It doesn't even really turn out the way that I told God he should make it turn out. Right. And yet somehow beauty comes as a result, and growth comes as a result. And it's that continual process. It's a cycle for me that happens over and over again. And I think I get it right. I'm like, okay, God's in the details. Yeah. Tomorrow he won't be. You know? Yeah. And then I get to go wrestle with it again. You know. So. Oh man.
Before we keep going, this
beautiful.
Is cool how this is all getting lit up in the back, and hopefully you can see a little bit of that. The mountaintops just getting glazed with light and how beautiful that looks. And I'm excited for it to start descending on here too. And that's one of the most interesting things about the way the sunrise works is it comes up and the light starts at the top because of the way it shifts and that angle. But I love that feeling as it's descending down upon you.
The light's coming on you. Yeah.
Instead of it being, any other, it coming from up or from below. As you're talking, I was thinking about one of my own experiences where I was actually in the mountains when I had probably one of my greatest wrestles with God. And I'm definitely going to get a little bit emotional on this one, but I was thinking about the time that He let me know that I had been forgiven of my sins. This had come after early on in high school, having some struggles, uncertainty, confusion, regular stuff that goes on for high school kids, making some poor choices and going further and further into college and struggling with some sexual addiction or with with drugs and different problems there, and removing myself from God at some point, saying He doesn't exist. If there's suffering in the world and there's wrong, He can't exist. Good people that make good decisions, why would they suffer? I just couldn't wrap my
it doesn't make
head
sense
around it, right? And so that was one of my wrestles was how do I reconcile that? And I think that pretty much every wrestle, God is right and loving and merciful and knows all. We can't see His perspective, and the wrestle is truly us trying to get to a place of surrender. He's the guy you can't pin, so you keep trying all day long, but at some point you just have to say, wait, why don't I try and see it from the way you see it and do things the way you would do it. But some stuff is just so hard for us to get. And so that's how it was for me in this place of, if there's suffering in the world, God can't exist. And time goes on. I have some experiences that show me, because of love, immense love that I experienced from my siblings, from you, from other family members, from close friends. And it all informed me of a God that existed. And until I sought it out and got down on my own knees and prayed and begged. I was reading the scripture this past week about Paul in Hebrews, and he's saying something along the lines of, go boldly, approach the throne of God boldly. That was the first time, when I was in college and had been at the lowest point in my life, starting to recognize, no, there is good around me. Who's the source? And kneeling down, I boldly asked that question. And it was, God, are you there? And like lightning of calm, this perfect feeling of total peace. When I was at a time of absolute chaos in every other aspect of my life, He spoke peace to my heart. So that taught me that He existed. I still had these questions of how does suffering play into my life and into the life of everyone who exists? Yeah. How does sin, we make mistakes, and unknowingly sometimes going into things and adding these burdens into our lives. I went on a bike ride, my bike trip, where at some point I was in the middle of Colorado. I was up in the mountains. It was near Coeur National Forest. I was sitting at the edge of this lake. I'd been praying for probably 6 months, begging and pleading for guidance on how to be forgiven of my sins, because I had done some pretty jacked up stuff and I felt the weight of them.
Yeah.
I felt so much remorse. I felt pain. I felt
Shame.
anguish, shame, and I didn't think I could be forgiven. And I remember sitting at the edge of this lake, this reservoir. These mountaintops are coming out of it, and the sun's setting. And just being totally alone in that space. I got in the water. I swam around. I'd been really salty from biking all day, so it was really nice and refreshing just physically. But as I was sitting there on the edge, I was thinking about how clean I felt and how good I felt. And this light is just descending down upon me. And I went and prayed that night and for hours. And it wasn't, God, have you forgiven me? I was feeling gratitude for people in my life and the love that I knew He had for me. And it wasn't a voice. There was no grand message that, came down on a scroll or anything. It was this perfect and very distinct feeling of, I forgave you. And that shook me up.
It's amazing. It's a choice experience, Chase, and it's amazing the power of what love can do when we allow it to pierce our hearts, what God can do when we allow Him to step into that space, usually in the midst of our biggest darkness, and speak love, and the transforming power that love can have in our lives. I know that was a big turning point for you in your life, where that love has really altered the course of where your life was headed.
Absolutely.
And I see that all the time in my own life, in the lives of the clients that I work with. And the challenge with this is that I myself have a struggle with the continuous faith of going back around and saying, let God's love guide me. Let God's love guide me. And then somehow I block His love through my false agreements about my life, or because I feel like I need to be in control of everything. And it's over and over again that I have to be reminded and be broken. And I see that happen with my clients all the time. And I believe so firmly that this is such an individual process, that we all go on our own journey. We all get to do our own wrestle. Nobody can do this part for us.
You can't hand it to your therapist.
You can't, yeah. I as a therapist can't fix that.
Yeah.
The best thing I can do as a therapist is try to get out of the way while still showing support and love, and reassured that I believe in a process. That process is there, that it's okay to struggle, it's okay to have your questions, it's okay to be angry at God sometimes, and that's part of the process, as I believe it was designed for our growth and, believe it or not, our happiness. And I was thinking a little bit, scripturally speaking, you mentioned Paul. I thought of Jonah and the wrestle that he had with God. I
don't want to go to Nineveh.
He's like, God's like telling him, all you got to do is just go teach the people in Nineveh. And Jonah's like, no, like, I'll go somewhere else, like, I'll do whatever, but not Nineveh, those people are tools, and so God's like, no, it's Nineveh, like, that's where you go. And Jonah's like, no, and finally he gets what, we all know the journey, he gets basically just worked over by God, like, he gets eaten by the whale, he's in darkness, ultimate darkness, the symbolism there to what I think a lot of us feel emotionally when we wrestle with God as we go to those places of our darkness. And finally, he comes to the point of what I call breaking, which is breaking in a very good way, in a very humble way, in a way that we finally break ourselves back into God's love. And then he gets spit up and he goes and does his job. That story is so symbolic to me of what it's like to live our lives in this constant struggle with faith, with God, to try to figure out, even right now, the things that we're going through. You came to me with some pretty poignant things just last week, and I sat there and listened to them, and I said, you're totally right. Like, I hear everything you're saying. Like, I probably need to make some of the same changes you're talking about. I'm not ready to. So I'm sure something's going to be happening with this wrestle. I'm going to lose my job or something, or, something's going to happen, and I'm going to be broken, and it'll be great.
Oh, man.
But I see this with my clients, and I hurt so badly with them at the same time that I'm so excited that they get to go through their crisis of faith. And I get to be a witness of that process as they go through it. And the blessing, and then maybe this is something you might speak to a little bit too, is what is the blessing of the wrestle? Like, why is that a good thing for us? Because none of us would really, I think, say, I want more struggle.
Yeah.
I want to know, I want to fight with God as to whether or not he's there in my life. Why is the wrestle so beneficial?
My first thought was it's because we individually get to experience it and know it for ourselves. Going back to what you were saying, it's not something you can hand off. It's something that we have to do. And for a long time when I was growing up, I was relying on other people and the faith that they had in order to get me through some struggles that I was facing. That can only go so far before you hit a real hard time, and it's between you and God. There's nobody else. I was mentioning how I was out there on the lake and I was alone.
Yeah.
There was nobody else there to say, hey, you should go up and pray now, or you should think about this thing. I had to decide to do those things. And I think God leads us along, and that he invites and entices us to those good places, but it has to be the individual that makes the decision. And when we do, we gain so much from it. That's now in my repertoire. That's now in my arsenal. That's for when those tough times hit again, I can look back and I can remember, no, I had that feeling. I know I had that feeling. That was a huge
moment. Yeah, I knew God was there for me.
Right. Mm-hmm. And the more often that happens, big or small, the more that we're able to build that bedrock foundation.
Faith.
That isn't going to shake. It might shake because the trials get harder, or they're more diverse than what we had previously experienced. But thinking about it, I at least have this one thing that I know I can hold on to when that storm hits. And I am trying to continue to build out that foundation so that I'm prepared for whatever is to come. But yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I as you're talking, I'm just thinking of all of the other little things in my life that have stacked up to lead me to this point of knowing that I'm not ready to make certain changes now that God's telling me to, but eventually I will, because I more and more have these experiences of deeper faith. And the other thing that I was thinking is that one of the benefits of at least embracing this idea of a struggle with God or with a higher power is that it shifts the way that we can interpret our suffering. Even if we can't find the meaning in it in the moment, succumbing to this idea that I'm going to be wrestling with it gives me a chance to then look at it with a different set of eyes, to say, instead of like, oh, poor me, why is this happening? This isn't fair, which is common for all of us. It's part of the stages of grief sometimes, right?
Yeah.
It allows us to start to turn our mind to something else, our heart to something else that instantly can relieve us of suffering, which is, I don't know. I don't know what this is all about, but I have to believe that there's something that I can learn or grow. And in the shift of that perspective, it starts to move us into more of what we call a growth mindset instead of a fixed mindset. And it allows us to now see our life experience as this opportunity of growth, even though it might be a struggle in the moment, instead of just a series of events that doesn't make any sense, that doesn't seem fair. You know, the other thing that I was thinking about with this wrestle with God is the fact that we as human beings are by nature so self-absorbed. You know, the world truly revolves around us. I mean, we're standing here and we think we're the center of the world right now. And when we allow ourselves to go through the struggle, when we allow ourselves to at least acknowledge that there might be something or somebody bigger than me, more powerful, more knowing than me, just removing that self-centered perspective and allowing the fact that there might be more around us, it totally shifts the way that we see our relationships. It shifts the way that we see ourselves, because when we are the center of the universe and things don't go right, we're screwed. We're hosed. You know,
everything crumbled.
Yeah, it's impossible because of the fact that we can't control everything, even though we'd like to.
Right.
And being able to give that over, or at least potentially think about giving it over, allows us space. It creates space for movement when otherwise we'd be totally stuck. So
I was trying to decide whether or not I should share the story about the you know, we have wrestles that are large, we have some that are small. The one that recently happened about a week ago was I kind of, not an argument, but a very heated discussion full of emotion, I think is the best way to put it, between my sister, your wife, and I don't need to go into details. We're just on opposite sides of this topic. And at some point, I kind of felt sour, I felt pride, I felt anger come in, and I shut down and was just wanted to be done with the conversation. And so that next morning, I woke up, had weird dreams. I was ruminating. I don't know if this ever happens to you, where you wake up in a gradual way, and your dream that you were having slowly becomes just a thought that you're thinking while you're awake.
yeah,
And whenever that happens to me, like, sometimes it's about weird things. Like, I'll have a dream that I'm like riding a dirt bike, and then I wake up and I'm thinking about places I could go ride dirt bikes, and then I'm like, I get fixated on it, and then I'm like, how do I get a dirt bike? And then the next, you know, at some point I realize, like, why am I still thinking about dirt bikes? It's been 30 minutes and I need to wake up and go do something with my life. But that happened with this, you know, kind of reliving the disagreement. And when I got in the car to head up to work, I have a long commute on once a week. I go up to Idaho Falls. It's about a 2-hour drive. And while I'm driving up, I borrowed your car. You guys are kind enough to loan us a car while our second one is in the shop. I was about an hour into the drive. I had been praying that morning, please help me to get to a good place.
Soften my heart.
Soften my heart is exactly what it was.
Yeah.
Please help me to soften my heart towards this relationship and towards that discussion, and to maybe see things differently. And so I'm kind of waffling. God's enticing me, inviting me to come see it from his perspective. And I get a little closer, and then I'm like, no, I don't,
I'm not ready to. I want to keep my pride.
Yeah, I want to hold on to my pride. If I don't have my pride, who am I? What am I? But I got to that hour mark, and I decide, let's check and see what's in the CD player. I haven't had anything to listen to. I've just been sitting silently in my thoughts, and I need to get something to focus on. Pop out the CD, and it just says country.
It's like a burn CD.
Burn disc, Sharpie, country. And my first thought is, damn it, why has it got to be country? It could have been anything else. And, just knowing that these Patrick boys, it was tied. So explain that CD.
So basically that CD this is like country from like back when I was in high school, like 20 years ago. So
it's old.
I had burned the disc, and then it ended up in Brandon's hands, and Brandon had taken the car from my parents, and then he had put the disc in the car, and then he'd given me the car. And I had never checked the disc thing, so then I gave you the car, and then you pulled it out and saw that it was our country from high school.
Yeah. So my immediate reaction is, no, I'm not listening to country. I'll sit in silence. But God spoke something differently, and I decided I'll pop it back in. We'll give it a shot. And the first song that comes on, it starts out in kind of this story format, and I'm picking up on little pieces of like what it's about, and the chorus is, these are just a few questions that I had.
Yeah,
and
I think it's Clay Walker's, the song is called A Few Questions I Have, and he's asking God all of these different questions about why can we put a man on the moon but we can't fix the problem with cancer.
Yeah, for kids. Or why is it that I was born with freedom and some person has only known war their whole life?
And he's just asking God all these questions, right?
Yeah, and it's all about different levels of suffering. His cousin died, and like, why do you have to die when he was 17? And he was young and innocent and all this stuff. And it was funny because it struck me hard. Like, I got hit by a 2x4 upside the head, God wink style.
God wink, like
yeah. And it helped me to realize, hey, the real thing that we were discussing last night was about suffering. And while I might not understand why suffering exists, my sister was feeling so much emotion for people that have been victims of sexual abuse, is really what it came down to.
And she was feeling it.
She was feeling that. She was in the heat of that emotion, and that song helped me to recognize that pain that she was feeling, and to see it as being pain and not just a disagreement that we had. That was a wrestle.
Shake you loose from your pride.
Yeah.
You surrender back and go, okay, I see the perspective. I still have my own perspective.
Yeah.
Which is also true, has truth to it, but I now am no longer stuck. And you and I would both look at that and say like, how is it, because it happened to be just exactly what it was, that a CD from 20 years ago would end up in a car that wasn't even any of ours.
Yeah.
And come back around full circle in that moment that you're wrestling with the question with God, saying, help me have some perspective here.
I mean, like, it was the exact topic, too. Right. I mean, there's no more perfect song that exists in the world that could have come.
I might have to post that to some Songs of the Soul or something.
Oh, man.
So
seriously.
That's an awesome story, though. And that's the thing, is like, we could find those types of moments in our lives all over the place if we're looking for them.
Right, seeking them.
Right, if we're seeking them, if we're wrestling, if we're willing to go to those places and say, I don't know if I want the answers, but I'm willing to seek them.
Right.
And if we do that, that's at least for you and I. We don't have all the answers, but that's at least for you and I something that's played out time and time again that has led to peace, it's led to joy, it's led to deeper connection and understanding of God, and over the years, firmer and firmer faith in knowing that we're not alone here, and that there is someone who knows, someone who can make good out of bad, who can bring light into the darkness, and so that wrestle is just a necessary part. That's one of the reasons why we picked it as the first principle.
Yeah.
So, you have any other thoughts? Or?
I'm thinking a little bit more about faith and how it relates to the candle with the flame. And life is really, when we come down here, it's really like being in a dark room and not being able to see anything. And I don't know, when was the last time or a time that you can think of where you were in pitch black, like no light whatsoever? Like what was a time that you can think of?
It's actually really funny. It just happened fairly recently, and it's amazing how it changed the scenario, because I was up on the mountain hunting deer. Beautiful day, awesome day, pure sunshine, loved it, like having a great time. And by the time we were done, we were still a little ways off from the truck, and it got dark. And it wasn't like a little dark, it was dark. You know, like couldn't see, and I didn't bring my headlamp with me. And it was amazing how the emotion that I felt and the energy that I felt shifted from what had been this beautiful, glorious day to fear, to panic, to, you know, that feeling of darkness and being totally alone, and then wondering about the predators that are now living in the woods too, like the cougars, and you know, and wondering like, what have I done to myself? And the only difference was going from light to darkness.
Yeah.
So that was the last time, not too long ago, actually.
Oh, that's great. I was just thinking about a time that I was over at Papa's house in the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee. Power went out. He's in a place that's kind of nestled in between these, in a ravine, really, is what it felt like. So there's no ambient light that's coming in from outside. It just doesn't exist from the city. And when the power went out up there, I mean, I woke up and I had to get up and go do something. Maybe it was just take a whiz, I don't remember, but I do remember the feeling of going to flip on the light and nothing coming on, and trying again and again, looking around and realizing there's not even like the little glows from you know, like a VCR or
It was nothing.
Yeah, or anything. And it would be a VCR because it's Papa's house.
Yeah.
I was in pitch black, and his house, I was upstairs in that second bedroom. It's like an octagon shaped room, and they've got really steep, creaky stairs that I'm amazed somebody didn't fall and break their hip off of that.
Yeah.
But I had to descend those stairs, navigate through the house to get to a place where I could find a flashlight that I knew where one was. And it was hard. It was really hard to do.
Yeah.
But once I had that flashlight lit and I was able to rely upon that light source, I was able to see my way. And I don't bring that up in the sense of God is going to show us perfectly the path that we need to take, and that we'll see it and it's very visible and easy. I think that he gives us bits and pieces enough so that we still have to rely on faith. And say, all right, I had this feeling that this is the direction you want me to head, and I'm going with it because I believe so fully in you. And I believe so fully in your plan for me that I'm going to take this step.
Yeah.
And that's really hard to do.
That's really hard to do, and that's a really good reason why, one of the reasons why we picked the candle too, is that idea of taking the next step into, maybe it's just a tiny little bit of shadow or light, but not really ever needing to see the full picture, and not needing to see the full picture in order to take the step. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why we picked the candle. As you were talking, and just one other thought, a little stanza of a poem that I learned somewhere. I don't know who wrote it. It came to mind, but it says, all who journey soon or late must pass within the garden's gate, and kneel alone in darkness there and battle with some fierce despair. God pity those who cannot say, not mine but thine, who only pray to let this cup pass away, and cannot see the purpose of Gethsemane. And I think we all go through our own little darkness of Gethsemane over and over and over again. We get a chance over and over again to come to a point of either being bitter and angry or saying, not mine but thine. And there is some freedom found in that heartfelt, not mine but thine. That surrender of those things that I can't control. and acknowledging that there has to be something or somebody bigger than me. So, I don't know. Any other thoughts? We're right there at the top of the light. Look at that.
It's just barely hitting the top of that.
Just about ready to crest over. Over here is really beautiful. We might need to turn it around too and show them for a second.
Let's do a quick little pan. There it is. Kind of see some of the edges of the mountains lighting up. But man, it is gorgeous out here today. All right, well, you got anything else?
No, just you guys start to contemplate and ponder what your own struggles and wrestle is with God. This will be a topic this is going to be one of our core principles that we'll continually, frequently come back to and reinforce and talk about. And we'll just kind of continue to go through with some of our other topics, right?
Yeah. So the next one that's in the list is gratitude, breathing humility.
Mm-hmm. And that also falls under the category of connection to God.
Yeah,
for us.
The God branch.
Yep, the God branch. And we'll probably need to make an image or something of the tree. But yeah. So thank you guys. Love to hear what your struggles and wrestles are too, and some of the ways that God winks at you once in a while. Thanks.